The sky was burning, not with fire from the sun but with the red streaks of alien ships. They moved like predators above the cities, silent but terrifying. Human eyes widened in fear as massive shadows passed over their homes, casting them into sudden darkness. For centuries, humans had thought themselves alone in the stars, free and safe. But now that illusion was shattered. The Zephyrians had come. They were tall, with bodies covered in metallic scales that glinted in the sun. Their eyes, black and unblinking, seemed to look into the very souls of humans. They moved with precision and confidence, their weapons cutting through the city defenses as if they were nothing. Humans fought back with tanks, jets, and missiles, but the Zephyrians' shields absorbed everything. Explosions lit the sky, but the aliens barely flinched. In the capital city of Aurora, chaos reigned. Buildings crumbled under alien fire. People ran blindly through smoke and debris, carrying what little they could save. Among them was Daniel Harper, a former soldier turned civilian after years of peacetime. His hands were shaking, not from fear, but from the cold metal of the rifle he carried. It was old, worn and almost useless against the alien invaders, but it was all he had. Daniel's younger sister, Lila, clung to his arm. Her small face was pale, eyes wide with terror. "Daniel, they are too strong. We can't fight them," she whispered, voice trembling. He didn't answer immediately. He knew she was right. Any normal fight was hopeless. But something inside him, deep and stubborn, refused to let fear control him. Humans had survived worse than this. They had adapted, endured, and thrived. And if they wanted to survive now, they would have to change too. "Come on," he said finally. "We're leaving the city." The old tunnels might still be safe. At least there they can't see us coming. Together they ran through the streets, past burning vehicles and falling rubble. The screams of people echoed in the air, but Daniel focused on moving forward. Somewhere in the chaos he caught glimpses of other survivors, families, children, and elderly people, all running, all terrified. The city, once full of life and laughter, was now a cage of fire and fear. As night fell, Daniel led his sister and a small group of survivors to the abandoned subway tunnels beneath the city. The darkness was oppressive, but it was safer than the open streets. Outside, the alien ships continued their slow, methodical sweep, hunting for life. Inside, humans huddled together, sharing whispers and glances of despair. Among the group was Mara, a former engineer with sharp eyes and quick hands. She examined the group's limited weapons and supplies. "We can't fight them head-on," she said bluntly. "We don't have the firepower, the armor, or the numbers. If we try, we die," Daniel nodded. "So we run, we hide, and we wait. But we can't just sit here forever." A chill ran down his spine. Waiting was dangerous. The Zephyrians had scanners that could detect heat, movement, even subtle vibrations in the ground. One careless step and they would find them. Weeks passed in the tunnels. Humans scavenged what they could from abandoned buildings, from collapsed streets, and from forgotten military outposts. They learned to move silently, to hide, and to speak in whispers. Every encounter with Zephyrians ended in fear, as their weapons could strike from hundreds of meters away, killing instantly. One night, as Daniel and Mara were examining a map of the city, a small group of survivors rushed into the tunnel. They were bruised, bleeding, and terrified. They took the northern district," one of them gasped. "Entire squads of Zephyrians. No one survived." Daniel's hands tightened around his rifle. The weight of their failure pressed down on him. He had hoped humans could hold at least a part of their city. But now hope seemed thin, fragile, like glass ready to shatter. Mara looked at him, her face grim but determined. "We can't rely on hope alone. We have to adapt. If we want to survive, we have to change how we fight." Daniel frowned. "Change how?" "They are stronger, faster, smarter than us. Every weapon we have, every strategy we know, it's useless against them." Mara's eyes glinted. "Maybe, but they are not perfect. They rely on patterns, routines, and technology. They have never faced humans hiding in the shadows, striking where they don't expect. They have never faced guerrilla warfare." Daniel thought about her words. Guerrilla warfare. Hit-and-run attacks, traps, ambushes, sabotage. It sounded like something from history books, something primitive. Yet in their current situation, it might be their only chance. Over the next few days, the survivors began to learn. Mara taught them how to set traps using debris, simple explosives, and even alien tech scavenged from fallen soldiers. Daniel trained the men and women to move silently, to listen for the slightest change in sound. to strike quickly and vanish before the enemy could react. At first, the attacks were small, almost symbolic. A supply convoy ambushed here, a lone patrol eliminated there. The Zephyrians dismissed these incidents as minor inconveniences. But for the humans, every success was a spark of hope. Every victory, no matter how small, gave them confidence. Daniel noticed something changing in the survivors. Their fear was not gone, but it was being replaced with something else. Focus, determination, even a kind of feral intensity. They were learning to think like hunters, to anticipate movements, to survive against impossible odds. One morning, Daniel and Mara led a small team to sabotage a communication tower. It was risky. The tower was heavily guarded, and failure meant death. Yet they moved with precision, slipping through shadows, neutralizing patrols silently, and planting charges. Within minutes, the tower was in ruins. From a distance, they watched the Zephyrians scramble, trying to understand what had happened. Daniel allowed himself a small smile. "They are starting to learn," he said. Mara shook her head. "No, they are confused. And confusion is weakness. We need to keep pushing them into it." Over time, humans became more daring. They studied Zephyrian patrol patterns, learned to exploit the terrain, and even repurposed alien technology for their own attacks. Improvised explosives, energy traps, and silent projectiles became their weapons. Every encounter with the enemy forced them to adapt faster than ever before. But with every step forward, the cost became clear. People were injured, some were lost forever, and the darkness of survival began to leave marks on their minds. Daniel noticed it in the way the survivors moved, the way their eyes scanned every shadow. There was no more laughter, no more casual conversation, only focus and the constant, unrelenting drive to survive. One evening, as Daniel and Lila sat in a small cave above the river that cut through the forest, Lila spoke quietly. "Daniel, do you think we will ever be the same?" He looked at her, her face lit by the pale light of the stars above. "No," he said honestly. "We can't. Once you see the world like this, once you fight like this, you change. But that's not necessarily bad. Change is how we survive." Lila shivered, not from the cold, but from the truth of his words. "I'm scared," she admitted. Daniel placed a hand on her shoulder. "We all are. But fear keeps us alive. It's what drives us to be clever, to be careful. And it's what will make us stronger. You will see, the nights grew longer. The humans moved more, struck more, and learned more. The Zephyrians, confident in their superiority, began to refer to the humans in whispered reports as monsters of the tunnels, because no one could predict their movements. No one could stop their attacks. A supply convoy would vanish without a trace. A patrol would be wiped out silently, leaving nothing but eerie silence in their wake. Daniel realized something. The Zephyrians were powerful, but they had one weakness humans had known for centuries: adaptability. Humans were unpredictable. Humans were resilient. And humans, when cornered, could become something terrifying, something the galaxy had never seen. By the end of the first year of the invasion, humans were no longer just survivors. They were students of war, learning and evolving at a pace that shocked their alien invaders. The tunnels, forests, and mountains of their homeworld became their classrooms. Every scar, every loss, every night spent in fear became a lesson in survival. Daniel looked at the horizon one day from a cliff above the forest. Smoke rose from distant cities, the alien occupation spreading, but he felt something he hadn't felt in a long time: determination. The Zephyrians might call them monsters, but he knew the truth. Humans were more than that. They were clever, strong, and unstoppable when driven by necessity. And soon the Zephyrians would learn that the monsters they feared were not born. They were made, and they were just getting started. The forest had become a new kind of city for the humans. Trees that once provided shade and beauty now offered cover, hiding spots, and vantage points. Rivers were no longer just sources of water. They were natural barriers, supply routes, and traps for unsuspecting invaders. The mountains and caves, long abandoned and silent, now echoed with whispers of planning, strategy, and determination. Humanity had been pushed to its limits, but they were learning. They were changing. Daniel Harper led a small band of survivors deeper into the forest. With him were Mara, his sister Lila, and a dozen others, men and women who had once been ordinary citizens. Now they were something else. Hunters, soldiers, and strategists all rolled into one. They moved with quiet precision, listening for the slightest rustle of leaves, the faint hum of alien sensors, or the distant roar of Zephyrian patrols. Mara carried a satchel filled with supplies scavenged from old laboratories and fallen alien soldiers. There were small energy disruptors, makeshift explosives, and improvised rifles. "We don't have much," she said softly, "but we have enough to make an impact. Enough to make them scared." Daniel glanced at her. "Good, that's the plan. Strike fast, hit hard, then disappear. They can't fight shadows." The humans had begun to understand the Zephyrians. Their strength lay in technology and numbers. Their weakness lay in predictability. Patrols followed strict schedules. Supply lines ran in straight, unguarded paths. Communication hubs were centralized and vulnerable. And, most importantly, the Zephyrians had no experience dealing with humans who fought like predators. It started small. A supply convoy would arrive in the middle of the night, unaware of the humans lying in wait. Daniel's team would strike with silenced rifles, traps, or explosives. They would vanish before the aliens could even react. Survivors would whisper about the humans that struck like shadows. And soon the Zephyrians began to speak of them in fear-filled tones, calling them forest monsters. One morning, Daniel and Mara planned a raid on a Zephyrian fuel depot. The humans had scouted it for weeks, memorizing patrol routes and shifts. Lila, though younger and less experienced, had a role too. She would act as a decoy, drawing attention to one side of the depot while the team struck from another. The night was quiet, broken only by the chirping of insects and the rustle of leaves in the wind. Daniel signaled the team and they moved silently, like shadows stretching across the forest floor. Every step was calculated, every sound minimized. They had become masters of patience, waiting for the perfect moment. When the first Zephyrian soldier appeared, Lila stepped into view, waving her arms and calling out. The alien froze, scanning her, and then, as planned, moved toward her. From their hidden positions, Daniel and the others struck. Explosions tore through the depot as improvised charges detonated. Fuel barrels ignited and the fire roared into the night sky. The Zephyrians tried to respond, but confusion reigned. They were trained for open battle, not for human predators who used the terrain, shadows, and misdirection. Within minutes, Daniel's team had achieved what would have been impossible in a conventional fight: destruction of critical resources without a single human casualty. As they retreated into the forest, Daniel allowed himself a rare smile. "They're learning to fear us," he whispered. Mara nodded, but her eyes were hard. "Fear isn't enough. We have to make them hesitate. Hesitation is what gives us the upper hand." Over the next months, the humans' attacks became more daring. They set traps along supply routes, sabotaged communication arrays, and even turned some alien weapons against their owners. Every encounter forced them to adapt faster than ever before. A simple ambush became a test of strategy, patience, and cunning. But adaptation came at a cost. Every mission left scars, physical and mental. The humans began to notice the changes in themselves and each other. The laughter that once filled their underground tunnels had vanished. Casual conversation was rare. Every glance, every movement was measured, every thought focused on survival. One evening, Daniel gathered the team in a hidden cave, walls lined with stolen maps and plans. "We've learned a lot," he said, "but this is just the beginning. They are strong, yes, but they are predictable. And we are humans. We adapt, we survive, and we can make them regret ever coming here." A murmur of agreement ran through the group. Mara added, "We've seen what fear does to them. But fear alone won't win this war. We need to strike smart, hit them where it hurts, and never give them a moment to recover." They planned another mission, targeting a central supply hub where Zephyrians stored weapons and food. Intelligence suggested the hub was lightly guarded, relying on drones and sensors. Humans could bypass the drones if they moved carefully, using the forest to mask their heat signatures and vibrations. The night of the raid, tension ran high. Daniel led the team, while Lila and two others acted as scouts. Mara carried a device that could temporarily disrupt the alien sensors. Every step forward was a test of nerves. One wrong move could mean death. As they approached the hub, Mara activated the disruptor. The sensors flickered and went silent for a short window. Daniel signaled, and the humans moved in. Traps were set, explosives planted, and the team slipped back into the shadows. Moments later, the hub erupted in controlled chaos. Fires spread, alarms blared, and the Zephyrians scrambled to respond. But it was too late. Daniel and his team were gone, hidden by the trees and darkness. From a distance, they watched as panic spread among the invaders. The humans had learned not only to survive, they had learned to fight with precision, patience, and fearlessness. As weeks turned into months, the humans' reputation grew. Stories spread among both humans and Zephyrians. Humans struck from the shadows appeared and vanished like ghosts and left destruction in their wake. They were clever, relentless, and terrifying. The aliens had never encountered anything like them. Daniel noticed something else. Humans were changing inside. The fear that had once paralyzed them had transformed into something sharper. Survival required ruthlessness, decisiveness, and cunning. People who had once been ordinary citizens were now capable of acts they would never have imagined before the invasion. Yet every action, every strike was tempered with a sense of purpose. Humans did not kill for pleasure, they killed to survive. One day, as Daniel and Mara were examining alien patrol routes from a cliff, Mara said quietly, "Do you realize what we're becoming?" Daniel looked at her. "Yes, but it's necessary. We can't survive otherwise. Fear doesn't keep you alive. Adaptation does. And humans. Humans are masters at adaptation." Below them, a group of Zephyrian soldiers marched, unaware of the humans watching from above. Daniel grinned. "Watch this." He motioned to Lila, who had taken a position with a bow, armed with an arrow tipped with a small explosive. She let it fly and it struck a patrol vehicle. The explosion was small but enough to cause confusion. The soldiers scattered, trying to find the source while the humans disappeared into the forest unseen. Mara shook her head in awe. "They'll call us monsters," Daniel shrugged. "Let them. Monsters survive. Monsters adapt. That's what we are now." Months passed and the humans' guerrilla tactics became more sophisticated. They learned to create false trails, use decoys, and manipulate the Zephyrians' perception of space and time. An ambush here, a sabotage supply line there, and soon entire squads of aliens hesitated before entering areas once thought safe. The forest itself seemed alive, watching, protecting, and striking in concert with its human inhabitants. But the transformation was not only tactical. The humans were changing in body and mind. Long nights, constant stress, and the need for silence sharpened their senses. Eyes became better at spotting movement. Ears attuned to the slightest rustle. Minds capable of predicting enemy patterns. They were becoming something different, something the Zephyrians had never imagined. One evening, Daniel sat by a river with Lila, watching the reflection of the stars in the water. "Do you feel it?" he asked. "The change?" She nodded slowly. "We're different. Stronger, faster, smarter, but also colder. Sometimes I don't recognize myself." Daniel's jaw tightened. "It's a price we pay. War changes everyone, but it's better than dying. We can't afford to be weak anymore." Mara joined them, carrying a small device she had salvaged from a downed Zephyrian ship. "I've been studying their sensors. We can use them against them, turn their own technology into our weapon." Daniel looked at her, hope sparking. "Good, every advantage counts. Every small victory teaches us. Every step forward makes us monsters in their eyes. And that's exactly what we need to be." As the months turned into years, the humans' guerrilla warfare grew into a symphony of destruction and precision. The Zephyrians began to fear entering forests, mountains, or even abandoned cities. They whispered of humans who struck without warning, vanished without trace, and seemed to be everywhere at once. The humans had become monsters. Not monsters of mindless violence, but monsters of survival, cunning, and adaptation. They were shadows, hunters, and warriors, forged by fear and necessity. And for Daniel, Mara, Lila, and the others, the question was no longer whether they could survive. It was whether the Zephyrians could survive their wrath. The humans had changed. The forest, the mountains, and the tunnels had forged them into something more than survivors. They were no longer ordinary men, women, or children. They were predators moving silently, striking without warning, disappearing before the enemy could react. The Zephyrians called them monsters, but Daniel knew they were something even more terrifying. Humans who refused to surrender. The morning air was crisp and still as Daniel climbed a ridge overlooking the Zephyrian supply route. Below, the alien patrol moved with mechanical precision. Every soldier, every vehicle, every drone seemed perfect. But the humans had learned that perfection had weaknesses. Predictability could be broken, patterns exploited, and confidence shattered. Daniel's team was ready. Mara crouched beside him, adjusting her improvised targeting device that could scramble alien sensors for short bursts. Lila, now a skilled tracker, crouched in the tree line, her bow and arrows tipped with small explosive charges. The other survivors hid across the ridge, spread into positions designed to surround and trap the unsuspecting patrol. "Remember," Daniel whispered, "this is not just about killing. It's about teaching them fear. Every encounter, every attack must leave a message. They need to know humans cannot be controlled." The first patrol vehicle moved into view. Mara activated the sensor disruptor. The vehicle's systems blinked and flickered. The humans waited, counting heartbeats, timing breaths. When the moment came, Lila released her arrow. It struck perfectly, detonating a small charge that sent the patrol into chaos. Vehicles overturned, drones fell from the sky, and soldiers scrambled blindly, unable to understand the attack. The humans descended from the ridge like shadows, striking quickly, disabling soldiers and then vanishing. By the time the Zephyrians regrouped, all evidence of the humans' presence had disappeared. The forest seemed alive, hiding them, protecting them. Daniel watched, pride swelling, but he did not celebrate. There was no time for joy. Every victory came with a cost. Every attack taught the humans something new about their enemies and something about themselves. They had learned to modify their bodies, in subtle ways, to survive. Hunger and harsh conditions had made them leaner, faster, and stronger. Long nights had sharpened their senses. Eyes that once saw only shapes now noticed every movement. Ears that once detected only loud sounds now heard the softest rustle of leaves or the hum of distant machinery. But the transformation was not only physical, it was mental. Humans had learned to embrace fear, using it to heighten awareness, sharpen reflexes, and guide decisions. Compassion, once a constant companion, became selective. They saved those who could fight, adapt, and survive. Those who could not were left behind. Every choice hardened them. Every strike reshaped them. In the tunnels beneath the ruined cities, Mara worked with other engineers to turn alien technology against its owners. Energy disruptors, automated mines, and sensor scramblers were scavenged, modified, and integrated into their guerrilla network. They learned to anticipate Zephyrian tactics before the aliens could even deploy them. One night, Daniel gathered the leaders of the human cells in a hidden cave. "We are no longer fighting to survive," he said, voice low but firm. "We are fighting to win. The Zephyrians think they can control this planet, but we have learned their weakness. They rely on patterns, on order, on technology. They have never faced humans who strike like shadows, and we will continue to strike until they fear every step they take." Mara nodded. "We've trained ourselves to be faster, smarter, and stronger. But fear alone isn't enough. We need precision, coordination, and patience. We need to be everywhere and nowhere at the same time." The humans' attacks grew bolder. Entire convoys disappeared overnight. Supply hubs burned to the ground. Alien patrols entered forest only to find themselves trapped, attacked from multiple directions simultaneously. Humans had become ghosts, predators that could not be caught. The Zephyrians began to hesitate, doubting every move, fearing every shadow, and humans were learning psychological warfare. They left signs, symbols carved into trees, strange arrangements of debris or trails leading nowhere, to make the aliens doubt themselves. Drones and patrols moved cautiously, scanning every inch yet still falling into carefully prepared traps. Every attack was a lesson in fear, a message that humans were no longer prey. But the transformation was not without darkness. The humans began to embrace cruelty as a tool. They killed swiftly without hesitation. They learned to anticipate alien behavior and exploit it, sometimes creating chaos simply for advantage. Some began to lose parts of their former selves. The gentle gestures, the small acts of kindness, the hesitation that once kept them human. Fear had made them monsters, but monsters that were necessary, calculated, and deadly. One morning, Daniel and his team moved to sabotage a Zephyrian weapons depot located on a mountainside. The depot was heavily guarded, and failure meant certain death. But the humans had prepared meticulously. They had mapped every patrol, identified every sensor blind spot, and created diversions to confuse the aliens. The operation began at dawn. Daniel signaled his team and they moved into position. Mara activated the disruptors, temporarily blinding the depot's sensors. Lila and another tracker slipped into position to create distractions. The humans worked in perfect synchronization, striking with speed and precision. Explosions tore through the depot, cutting off the Xipherians' supply of weapons and ammunition. When the smoke cleared, the humans vanished into the mountains. The Xipherians, confused and demoralized, began to retreat. They called their reports to command. The humans, they are monsters. They strike from nowhere. They vanish into shadows. We cannot control them. Daniel watched from a ridge, feeling a mix of triumph and unease. The humans had achieved the impossible. They had turned fear into a weapon, themselves into predators, and chaos into strategy. But he also knew the cost. Every day the humans became harder, colder, less familiar to those who had once been ordinary. The forest echoed with whispers of strategy and survival. Mara and other engineers continued to experiment, using alien technology to create traps, alarms, and weapons that the Xipherians could not predict. Humans became masters of their environment, bending it to their will. Trees became cover, rivers became barriers, caves became fortresses. Every inch of land became a tool for survival. And yet Daniel worried. He had seen the changes in Lila, in Mara, and in himself. There were moments when he recognized the sharpness in his own mind, the cold calculation, the willingness to do whatever was necessary to survive. Humanity was surviving, yes, but at what cost? One night, as the humans gathered around a small fire in a hidden valley, Lila spoke quietly. "Do you think we've gone too far?" Daniel looked at her, shadows flickering across his face. "No," he said slowly. "We've gone far enough to survive. But we must remember, survival doesn't always make us the people we once were. It makes us stronger, smarter, monsters in the eyes of those who think only in terms of strength and rules." Mara added, "The Xipherians are learning fear. That is our advantage. But fear is not enough. We must continue to evolve, to adapt, to strike where they least expect. We must become legends, ghosts, monsters that haunt their every thought." The humans trained harder than ever. They ran drills through forests, climbed mountains silently, and practiced ambushes in abandoned cities. Every day they tested their limits, learning to react faster, move quieter, and strike more efficiently. Even children, old enough to understand strategy, were trained in stealth, observation, and survival. They were becoming a new breed of humans, something the galaxy had never seen. The Xipherians' response grew desperate. They increased patrols, deployed more sensors, and relied on brute force. But every action was met with human cunning. Supply lines were severed, reinforcements trapped, and soldiers disappeared into forests without a trace. The invaders began to fear even the simplest missions, doubting every step. Daniel knew they were winning. The humans had become unstoppable in the shadows. Their ability to learn, adapt, and strike with precision made them monsters in the eyes of the aliens. And yet he could not ignore the truth. Humans were also becoming monsters to each other. Trust was rare, hesitation deadly, and compassion reserved only for those who could contribute to survival. One day, Daniel led a small team to ambush a Xipherian command squad. The aliens were confident, moving in formation, but Daniel had anticipated their tactics. The ambush was perfect. Explosives detonated at key points, traps immobilized vehicles, and humans struck from every direction. Within minutes, the squad was destroyed. As the survivors regrouped in the forest, Daniel observed their faces. There was no fear, only focus, only calculation, only the thrill of survival. Humanity had evolved, and the forest had been their crucible. Mara approached him, eyes scanning the horizon. "We've done it," she said softly. "They fear us. They think we are monsters, and in many ways." "We are," Daniel nodded. "Yes, but we are monsters made by necessity, by survival. And if the Xipherians continue to underestimate us, they will learn the hard way." From that day forward, humans struck with more confidence. They were no longer just survivors, they were hunters, strategists, and warriors. The Xipherians would never see them coming, never understand them fully, and never defeat them in conventional terms. The morning sun cast a pale glow over the forest. Mist curled between the trees, hiding movement and creating shadows that danced with the wind. Daniel Harper stood atop a ridge, watching the Xipherian command center in the distance. For years, humans had survived, adapted, and transformed into monsters of war. Now it was time to strike the heart of the alien occupation. Mara joined him, carrying a small satchel of devices and explosives. Her face was grim, but her eyes held the determination that had guided them through countless ambushes and raids. Lila stood nearby, bow in hand, silent and ready. The other teams were positioned across the forest, each waiting for the signal to move. Daniel took a deep breath. This is it. Years of training, years of survival, and years of adaptation have brought us here. The command center is their brain. Destroy it and the rest of their forces will crumble. But we must move carefully. One mistake and it all ends here. Mara nodded. We've studied their routines, their patterns. We know their weaknesses. Every trap, every patrol, every sensor has been accounted for. The humans began their descent toward the enemy stronghold. They moved like shadows, silent and precise. Each team had a role. Some would disable communications, others sabotage weapons storage, and Daniel's team would strike directly at the core of the command center. As they approached the outer perimeter, Mara activated a series of sensor disruptors. The Zephyrians' advanced scanning technology flickered and failed. For a brief moment, humans were invisible, ghosts moving across the landscape. The first team struck. Explosions tore through the perimeter walls, disabling defensive drones and causing chaos among the Zephyrians. Human teams appeared in multiple locations at once, ambushing patrols, dismantling weapons, and sabotaging supply lines. The aliens were stunned. For the first time, they were truly fighting humans on human terms, unpredictable, relentless, and deadly. Daniel's team reached the inner courtyard of the command center. The building was massive, towering over the forest like a dark monument of alien authority. Inside, they could hear the low hum of energy cores, the chatter of alien soldiers, and the mechanical whir of drones. We go in quietly, Daniel whispered. Disable the defenses, plant the charges, and get out before they even know what hit them. They moved with precision. Mara deployed energy disruptors to disable security systems. Lila scaled walls and took out sentries with silent shots from her bow. Daniel and the rest of the team infiltrated the command center, neutralizing soldiers and bypassing control panels. Every action was coordinated, every movement calculated. Humans had become monsters of war, and their efficiency reflected it. As they reached the central control room, Daniel planted the final charge. Mara interfaced with the alien systems, downloading intelligence that could help humans anticipate future attacks. Lila watched the entrance, alert for reinforcements. Suddenly, alarms blared. A squad of Zephyrians had detected movement and was moving in. Daniel's heart pounded, but he did not panic. This was the moment they had trained for, the moment to strike with everything they had learned. Positions, he shouted. Humans took defensive spots, using cover and traps. Explosives detonated, sending shockwaves through the command center. The aliens advanced, but the humans were ready. Every soldier that came forward was met with precise, calculated attacks. Some were caught in traps, others were disabled silently, and a few fled in confusion. Daniel moved to the main console. Mara, ready the disruptor, he commanded. Mara activated the device, sending a pulse through the control room that shut down security systems and communications. The command center was vulnerable. With a final glance at Lila and Mara, Daniel detonated the charges. The building shook violently as explosions ripped through the walls, destroying energy cores, weapon storage, and communication hubs. Smoke and fire rose into the sky, visible for miles. From the ridge, human teams watched as the alien command center burned. The Zephyrians' forces, already destabilized by months of guerrilla attacks, began to retreat. Supply lines failed, reinforcements were trapped, and the remaining soldiers fled in chaos. Daniel lowered his weapon, breathing heavily. Years of struggle, fear, and adaptation had led to this moment. Humanity had survived, and now they had reclaimed their world. But the victory was not without cost. Cities lay in ruins, forests were scarred, and humans had changed forever. Mara approached him. "We did it," she said softly, but her eyes betrayed the weight of what they had become. "They'll never forget us," Daniel nodded. "Nor should they, but neither should we forget ourselves. We've won, yes, but at what cost? We are stronger, smarter, faster, and yet we are different. We are no longer the people we were before the invasion." Lila joined them, looking over the burning horizon. "I feel proud, but also scared. We've become something else. Monsters in their eyes. Maybe in ours too." Daniel placed a hand on her shoulder. "It doesn't matter what they call us. What matters is that we survived. We adapted, we fought, and we will continue to survive. That is what makes us human. That is what makes us monsters and heroes at the same time." The humans spread through the forest and cities, helping survivors rebuild, guiding those who had lost hope, and securing their planet from further attacks. They were not just warriors, they were protectors, teachers, and leaders. The lessons of guerrilla warfare, of adaptation, of survival, were passed on to every new generation, but the transformation could not be undone. Humans had learned that fear could be used as a weapon, that patience and strategy could overcome overwhelming force, and that survival often required ruthless decisions. They had become monsters in the eyes of those who judged by strength alone, yet in their hearts they were still human, driven by determination, love for their families, and the instinct to survive. News of their victories spread beyond their planet. Across the galaxy, other civilizations watched humans with awe and fear. A species that had once been underestimated had emerged as a force to be reckoned with. Their ingenuity, adaptability, and relentless spirit became legends, stories whispered across star systems. And yet, on the planet itself, life began to return to a fragile normal. Survivors rebuilt homes, planted crops, and cleared the ruins of their cities. Daniel, Mara, and Lila watched from the ridge, reflecting on the journey that had brought them here. "Do you think it's over?" Lila asked quietly. Daniel shook his head. "No, the Zephyrians may return. Others may come. But we are ready. We have learned. We have changed. And no matter what comes, humans will survive. That is what makes us different. That is what makes us unstoppable." Mara smiled faintly. "And what we've become? Monsters, warriors, survivors. It's something no one can take away from us." For the first time in years, Daniel allowed himself to feel hope, not just for survival, but for the future. Humans had faced an enemy far stronger, far more advanced, and yet they had not only survived, they had triumphed. They had turned fear into a weapon, adaptation into strategy, and survival into legend. The forest whispered around them, alive with the sounds of life returning. Birds chirped, rivers flowed, and the wind rustled through the trees. Humanity had reclaimed their home, but they were no longer the same species that had once walked through the streets of Aurora, unaware of the stars beyond. They were humans who had faced annihilation, learned to fight as predators, and emerged victorious. They were monsters in the eyes of their enemies, heroes in the eyes of each other, and legends for the galaxy to remember. Daniel looked at Lila and Mara, then out across the horizon. "We did it," he said softly. "We survived. And nothing can ever take that away." As the sun rose higher, casting golden light over the forest and cities, the humans moved forward. They were scarred, hardened, and changed, but they were alive. They were free, and they were ready for whatever the universe would throw at them next. The Zephyrians had learned their lesson. Underestimate humans at your own peril. A species forged by fear, sharpened by necessity, and perfected by survival could not be stopped by technology, strength, or strategy alone. Humans were monsters, and they were unstoppable. The story of humanity's transformation would echo through time, from terrified survivors hiding in tunnels to predators striking from shadows. Humans had become a legend, a warning, and a symbol of what determination, adaptation, and courage could achieve, and the galaxy would never forget it.